I didn't really pick up the banjo until I turned 40. Something created the spark.
I think banjos are just so joyful.
And sometimes that's where the conversation starts.
I would say, an SM81, you gotta have the strings that you feel comfortable with.
These are much better than VHS strings. They are
Yeah,
VHS strings.
I want something that sounds banjo-y. It's hard for me to get away from these little multicolored because I've got plumber's hands.
It sounds rich and warm and detailed and everything's there. It feels good to hold a banjo and sit on your porch or wherever, and play the banjo.
Hey, good morning. It is Tuesday, April 8th, which means only one thing. It is National Banjo Day, and we are thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Jamie. I'm the COO at Deering Banjo Company. And today I'm joined by a couple of very good friends and guests here, and we're going to introduce them right now. First of all, Mr. Jens Kruger, all the way from North Carolina, Deering artist, general banjo virtuoso. And with me also, Mr. David Hess, Fort Wayne, Indiana, I think some would say the banjo guru of Sweetwater music, who today we've kind of teamed up with. And Dave, I wanted to talk with you first, if I may.
Sure.
You ask anyone in that campus, who do I talk to about a banjo? And they'll say Dave Hess. Dave's your guy.
Well,
so you probably feel
there had to be one, right?
Well, and we value it and appreciate it. But you probably field a lot of the emails and queries and this kind of thing. What are some of the things that you hear from Sweetwater customers specifically about first-time buyers or things that they're looking to get a hold of?
Sure. Well, I relate to a lot of the questions, first of all, and I don't know that I've ever shared this with you, Jamie, but I started playing guitar when I was 12, and I didn't really pick up the banjo until I turned 40. And I late in life learner, but I've always believed, life's about commas, not periods. And I was like, you know what? I'm in love with this instrument. I got sort of like a lot of people. I got something created the spark, and it was a particular artist and a particular album. And sometimes that's where the conversation starts, just getting into the ears of who's reaching out to us either in person at our storefront here in Fort Wayne or over the phone, like so many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers that we have. They come to us with an interest in the banjo, and that's really where it starts. What is your current point of reference, or what are you aspiring to do with the instrument? Maybe it's just curiosity. Maybe it's something really specific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find a lot of time they have a pretty clear idea when they come in of what they're trying to get to, or a lot of them just blank canvas? Sometimes it's just, I want something that sounds banjo-y, and that can be a conversation in and of itself. If I've got a customer that's a proficient guitar player that has some dexterity with his right hand, we might be looking at a 6-string, and our shop has the ability to set them up in a Nashville tuning or just leave them set up just as a straight 6-string, and we can add that because a lot of our customers are recording artists, and they may want that element, but then we also we'll qualify and make sure, hey, this person really wants a 5-string banjo. They want to sound like JD or they want to sound like Earl, and that might steer the conversation a different direction. But then you have the Carolina Chocolate Drops fans, and there's so much out there, so much in roots music right now that's exciting. It's a pretty wild time.
For
that kind of music. I mean, I talk a lot about Billy Strings, and kind of the impact that he's had just as a bluegrass band, basically filling out arenas, right? Which is not something that happens every day. So there's an impact there, and I think we're seeing it across stringed instruments in general, like with acoustic guitar growth and mandolin growth and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And certainly there's an interest in banjo as off the back of that as well. So, and Jens, you came with me when we went up to Sweetwater a couple of years ago to kind of get this thing launched off.
Yeah.
I know you came away with some very strong impressions, some very good impressions.
Yeah. It's Sweetwater. It's just great because that they will like people like Dave, Dave and others, at Sweetwaters, will talk to people who are interested in banjo and actually know something about it. And I mean that sounds maybe a little bit interesting, but there's been a lot of music stores, that have a banjo hanging there, but they don't even have a bridge on it, or or they don't know, the first thing about the instrument, which I don't blame them. It's not a huge market, but I think it's just so important, because the banjo has such great variety. There's so many different styles of playing and different, instruments that you could, look at, that it's just important that there's some knowledge, behind it, really. And, it's almost like electric guitars. There's so much going on, that there's so much to know. It's almost endless. And it's great to have, of course, have Dave, being so knowledgeable at Sweetwater. That impressed me a great deal.
There you go.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Dave, am I right in saying, I think I sent you some parts and bits and pieces that you you hosted several big training sessions, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we do weekly trainings in our training facility. I think you guys may have seen the theater here, and we'll have we have different concert events, but we also do, the primary purpose of it is training, but we also do a number of things called office hours during the week, where sales engineers maybe they're grabbing a coffee, refreshment, or after lunch they'll come through. And I set up shop a couple times here and had rims and tone rings and necks, parts and pieces, just to kind of go over, because a lot of our guys, I mean, they might be tenured guitarists like I was, that they're aware of what banjo spikes are, and they're loosely aware, about the benefit of a tone ring. But we compared and contrasted, and it was really great. I really appreciate you sending those along, and it's just to better equip us. We're a company that's always looking to do what we do in the best possible way we can and equip ourselves, and that was really great. And we're going to keep doing that as we grow the staff and grow the awareness. It's why it's Banjo Day today, right?
Yes, exactly.
People coming to Sweetwater.
Yes.
What are their options as far as, they can go to the website, which looks a little bit like this. Which is cool. There's a pretty extensive collection of D-rings on here. At least there was just a second ago. Should they call? Should they just order online? What is the kind of the best route, and who should they talk to beyond your wonderful self?
Sure. So, we meet people where they are. So there's a lot of folks that would like to shop online. They may lean on our reviews. They may sort by most popular instruments. Mm-hmm. But Sweetwater, ever since the beginning, has been a company you can call and have a conversation. We can talk about three-finger versus clawhammer, pull some of that information out, what might be inspiring someone to pick up a banjo to begin with. And we'll kind of talk through that stuff. And we carry a full line of D-ring. I mean, D-ring is our premier brand in terms of offering something from a good time that's a professional level playing banjo at an affordable price, all the way up to, we've got a 50th anniversary coming in. I'm excited about that. And
Yes.
and the idea being, if you're an established Sweetwater customer, you might reach out to your sales engineer, about the instruments. They may have been someone. We've got a lot of. I'm not the only banjo guy here. We actually have a few of us, and the numbers are growing. Indiana is a bluegrass state. I mean, you got Bean Blossom, and we're not too far from Marshall and Charlotte and all the great festivals here. So we got a lot of bluegrass fans. Probably one of the guys that knows most about banjos is a mean flat picking guitar player on staff here. So, he's been around a few banjos. So we'll walk you through that process, find what, look at the budget range, look at what you're trying to accomplish, look at maybe if buying your second instrument makes the most sense. If you're going to play three finger and you're going to want to go to a jam and you need that projection, we might be talking about a resonator as your first banjo, or we could talk just open back good time, because I find those instruments are phenomenal down the road. Even if somebody aspires to play in a more traditional resonator banjo eventually, they're just awesome couch banjos to just have around. So you might keep that that good time for as long as you play. It's going to be a cherished instrument.
Absolutely, yes. That's
100%. And then Sweetwater is capable of certain customizations.
Yes.
Do you want to give a very quick overview of the kinds of things that are available to
Yeah.
customers coming through?
Well, at a target price range, if anything's 300 and above, price tag wise, you might find on our website, you can expect that we've done a quality control inspection. We call it a 55-point inspection or evaluation. It's really a QC check to make sure that everything's in touch, everything's the way it should be. We don't have anything that happened from the manufacturer to us. That's rolled into everything, that price range and above.
I've seen it firsthand.
Oh yeah, it's an awesome process, and it's one that it takes the guesswork out of buying online, and you can pick the serial number of the instrument you want to purchase from us. We can then put spikes in, we can alter head tensions, we can change and do a setup to the string gauges Jens was talking about. We could switch out strings. We get customers that have a heavier hand. They might need a little higher action, a little more neck relief. We can dial that in for them. It gets down to what you want. If you want us to really dial it in the way you might have a favorite banjo, or you might have bought one from us before and you're buying your second one. We keep meticulous records in our service department on what that setup looked like, so we can deliver it again.
Really?
wow. Well,
Is that
Dave,
right? I didn't know you did that.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yep.
that's amazing customer service, to do that.
So you if I came and ordered a second banjo now, you already have a record of
Yeah.
what string gauges I used last time, what the relief was in the neck, probably what the head choice was.
Yeah,
or
we
whatever.
know all of that. Is if we've done a setup on it, we've notated all of that. If we haven't done a setup, the inspection, we sort of have a range where we know that banjo was from the factory, and we document that. And absolutely, string choices, we know exactly what string was on that when it left the building, whether we restrung it or whether it came from the factory. We keep record of that.
It's impressive. That's very good. So with that price range of 300 and above, I know everything goes through. So for peace of mind, that means that every single Good Time, Deering, Vega banjo goes through that 55-point inspection process, which is
it's just an extra set of eyes on it. I will say the Deering instruments, and I've unpacked a lot of boxes, and looked at a bunch of new banjos, and I can tell you from the unboxing, the bridges are set up on your banjos. I mean, you really don't have to do a lot, but we are shipping instruments, and since the beginning of time, instruments get damaged. It's a human. Any quality control inspection is a human looking at the banjo or the instrument. So we're just putting an extra set of eyes on that, so that our customers can buy it with confidence, know that it could get shipped, and that night they could go play a gig with it. That's the
goal.
idea of it.
That's what we do. That's what we're. I mean, as a company, it works. We've really spent a lot of time trying to figure out, even on the Good Time level, how to package those things to where really you should just be able to take it out of the box. Maybe give it a quick tweak on the tuning, because the strings are stretched in, then you should be on your way.
Yeah, I can tell you, feedback from my end, I see the hard work you guys are putting in, because they're really pretty dialed in from you. But we'll double check. I mean, we double check that bridge placement, and we can even get out a number 2 pencil and mark the head if a customer wants us to.
So 3-finger means that I use 3 fingers to play it. So I got 2 finger picks on my index and middle, each, and the thumb pick. And the thumb pick sticking out to the side, so I can really grab the string, with my thumb. And so that was before there was a three-finger style. There was a very prominent two-finger style where people would go. And then they started to incorporate the third finger, and it would start. Something like that, you know, or so it's basically every finger. It's not actually moving as fast. It sounds very fast, but it's like three fingers moving, and each one has its thing to do, and together they sort of make up this rapid speed. So you can play very fast on a banjo because you're playing with three fingers. Let's say when you play with a guitar pick, you have to play every note with the pick, either up or down, and then with the picks. So people come to me and say sometimes, it doesn't look like you're doing much, and actually when you really break it down, it's not as fast, of a movement as a guitarist would have to do the same kind of speed, and so three finger style was mainly came into place in the 30s. By people like Snuffy Jenkins and Earl Scruggs, Johnny Wisnant, and these people. And of course, Earl Scruggs was one of these people who perfected it to a way where it was very clean and very slick and very thought through. And he's a very intelligent, highly musical man who really put things into place on such, clean level that it just really was impressive to anybody who was a great musician of any style. And I think that is very important. Then there was, of course, Don Reno. He had to go and serve in the Second World War and 1940s. And then when he came back, Earl Scruggs was already, very famous at the time. And so he was a little bit frustrated about the fact that he was very able to play very similar to Earl Scruggs because they came out of the same sort of, idea. But then he developed a style which was then called, single string style, which is basically you taking two of these fingers, in the basic sense, and you go back and forth like you would with a plectrum. With the plectrum, you go up and down, and then and he would go up and down, just down with the thumb, up at the index.
Single string style.
So that's called single string style, and he really was prominent, in coming up with. So it's maybe not exactly what he played, but these ideas, playing melodic phrases like a guitar almost. And Earl Scruggs just had a few songs where he would do things like that, something like that maybe, but not much. It wasn't as, and so that's why you would have these two styles, the Reno style and the Earl Scruggs three-finger style, and that went all the way into the late 50s, where people started, developing a style called melodic style, and the idea there was that it was like almost you play a note, let's say you play this G note, and instead of playing the next note on the same string, you search for that note on the lower string. And so that enables you to have that first string still ringing, and then the next string, right? And then you try to play with every note you play, you try to play another string. So you can actually put the melody in a roll instead of playing it like a guitar. You would have put it in a roll. You see, so, and that becomes very fluent and very cascadey, almost like a harp playing it. It's like there's sustain that comes, and so these three styles basically together is what we look at today. It's all these three styles sort of merged into one thing, and with the help of a lot of players, that developed their own ideas on how to approach it. And I think these are the most prominent three-finger styles we have today. But
So list those styles out one by one, and then if you can, who are a couple of artists on who are really really good on each of those styles?
Yeah, that was my question. You know.
Yeah, so I would
Bill
say in
Keith
Scruggs style, you know, you would refer to, of course, you know, three finger style, you know, bluegrass picking. You refer of Earl Scruggs, of course, you know, Ralph Stanley. And you would have J.D. Crowe in procession, and Sonny Osborne,
Terry Bockham, people
Terry
like
Bockham, you know, and these people. Also, modern players, you know. You know, I just can't think of all of them, but it's just, you know, in traditional bluegrass, they're really great people. But these were the first ones, you know, Earl Scruggs, Don Reno, Ralph Stanley, J.D. Crowe, Sonny Osborne. You know, I would say Don Stover. You know, people like that. They were really. And then for the single string, you had Don Reno for the longest time. You know, and he was then of course Eddie Adcock, who sadly passed away just a few weeks ago. And so he was really already recording in 1958, 1960, very elaborate, you know, single string techniques, and he also incorporated a style like Merle Travis, where you have the thumb going. So he would go. You know, so he would do this, and until then, other players, you know, started playing always a little bit of the single string. And then I think, you know, one of the most prominent figures, you know, in banjo history in general would be Bela Fleck, you know, who came up with the entirety of connecting these licks that were mainly based out of positions, where he would like play out of a position, and then you can use that same lick in another position, and so almost like a guitar blues player, you know. And Bela Fleck would say, okay, why don't we just really learn the scales? And so he came up with systems, how to play scales on, you know, really, and then connect everything. And I think he was one of the first ones to really do it on that level, really, on the banjo, and that helped and opened up a lot of doors for everybody. And then, of course, today you have people like Ryan Cavanaugh, who can have unbelievable skills, you know, in doing single string techniques. Then in melodic style, of course, we had Bobby Thompson, Bill Keith, Eric Weisberg, actually, who recorded in 1962, you know, the Bumblebee sort of break for Shock in the Corn, all these. But they were the first ones who really used, you know, melodic style, and also recorded it, you know, partially with Bill Monroe playing Devil's Dream and doing all kinds of things. And then Carl Jackson, you know, was one of them, you know, who would also be a, you know, great in the 70s, talking about 70s banjo players. And then as soon with Bill Keith, of course, you know, playing all these melodic, also jazz-influenced, melodic style, Scruggs, everything together, with Bela Fleck and everybody else at the time. You know, it started to develop with Scott Vestal to this vastness of just unlimited possibilities on the banjo with the three-finger style. You know, where you could do tremolo, or where you can do all kinds of things, and you can learn classical pieces, and just look at the instrument as the instrument with the range, and then play anything, jazz, classical, folk, you know, whatever you like, and with the three-finger style. And
we would neglect to mention Tony Trischka in that group.
Of course, yeah. I'm sorry. That was a big mistake.
I would imagine.
I should have mentioned him. Of course, he is Tony Trischka. You know, that would be a separate book. You know, Tony Trischka and people like Peter Wernick. They were the ones in the early 70s and mid 70s that wrote, you know, banjo instruction books that helped everybody. You know, of course, there was the Earl Scruggs book. Before the Earl Scruggs introduction book was also the book of Pete Seeger, How to Play the Five-String Banjo. That's generations before me learned from that book, really, and because there was nothing really else. And then there was the Earl Scruggs book that was put together by Bill Keith, and he interviewed Earl Scruggs and wrote all the tablature and everything. And And then there was the book by Peter Wernick, Bluegrass Banjo, and then Tony Trischka did all kinds of, melodic style and all kinds of, and these books really helped the banjo to be recognized and be learned, all over the world, because it was hard to figure the banjo out just by listening to an album. Let's say when you listen to a jazz riff or just a guitar riff, you maybe have, and that is you can sort of figure that out. But if you hear, how do you gonna even begin? Because you have open strings, you have all kinds of different techniques, and it's so you don't even know if you're playing the right fingering, and so these books really helped people a great deal. So Tony Trischka.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to shift to a completely different style of 5-string banjo, and that's the Clawhammer style. So you're going to switch banjos, and I'd like you, before you do that, to explain why you're going to switch banjos.
Okay. So first of all, old-time Clawhammer banjo style is a style where you play without the finger picks, and then you play strumming the banjo with either the nail of the middle finger or the index finger, and you strike down with this. You don't pick up, you strike down, and then you play with the thumb. You play the 5th string or the 2nd string, so like that. Now, when you play bluegrass banjo, you hold the head, with you, and that keeps the head from ringing. You see now, it's dead. This rings, right? So, but if the head rings, you have a hollowness in the tone, which is not very good to amplify sometimes, or it just causes all kinds of problems. And then when you play now Clawhammer on a banjo, open with everything, it has a tendency of sounding a little bit like wild. Now, when you take an old-time banjo, so it doesn't have a back. And it because of that, it doesn't have this hollowness. It's a little bit more mid-rangey and percussive. I also put a head on here that I like very much. It's called a Renaissance head. It's by Remo. The head just gives a little bit more mid-range actually to the tone, and that helps Clawhammer to just cut through, because you're playing with your fingers. You just want a little bit of that, more of that mid-range. And then also, what I have a piece of cloth between the thing, so I keep the head from over-ringing all the time. So I can even tighten it up a little bit more. Doc Watson, he used to put things behind the bridge, underneath here, to dampen it, to get rid of that. Because alone, maybe it sounds good. If it doesn't, but as soon as you're in a situation, you lose a little bit of that focus of tone, and then in the band it sounds really good. Now, so this is the Clawhammer style. The idea, right? So
it's almost hypnotic Clawhammer.
It's beautiful because I like to play a lot of Clawhammer for myself, especially outside at night. When my raccoons are coming to my porch, and the thing is,
it's true. He does have raccoons that come to his porch.
Yeah, I know.
We've got him in Indiana.
Yeah. But the thing is that you give yourself your own rhythm, and it's so relaxed. Once you get that rhythm down, which is actually fairly easy, you just have. It's almost like playing a boron. Mm-hmm. You just have to go through that learning period of a few days, and then you get the hang of it. Right. And you just have to give you that little time. It's just some people get it in an hour, some people get it in 5 hours. Some people take a week of trying to get that motion right. But then once you got it for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about it. It's like riding a bicycle, and then you can just sort of. Then you pick out the melody notes here, on the. I'm right now in a tuning called double C tuning, which is the D string is tuned down a whole step, and the B string is tuned up a half step. So I got a C here, and I got a C here.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's called double C, because I got two Cs. And that's a very common old-time tuning, because it's easier to play, let's say in C like this, than playing in a C chord. Or you can play it on the second fret, or tune your entire banjo up to play in an old-time session where they play D, out of D, and then you play all evening. Old-time bands sometimes play the first set, in A, the second set in D, so the banjo doesn't have to constantly retune. And it sounds a little bit, but there's all kinds of tunings and mysterious things, about the banjo. In like this, when I was a kid, I heard this. This is called sawmill tuning or modal tuning, or it has just this C instead of a B. It's just one fret up. And there's a tune called. It sounds so magical.
Yeah.
It's so mystical. It is also so connected to nature in my imagination.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about microphones, because I think there's a lot of that Sweetwater audience there that may have come through Sweetwater off the back of buying audio equipment, mics, keen to figure out how to do it at home. Would I be right in saying that, Dave?
Oh yeah, we love microphones here for sure.
You do, yes.
Jens loves microphones too.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
What kinds of questions do you tend to get, Dave, about this kind of area? What do people want to know?
Yeah, so the just all the points we talked about earlier, how complex the instrument is harmonically, and capturing, like for instance, capturing a vintage sound. If somebody's looking to really get that three-finger sound, but have a more controlled recording, that frankly may be in a less than ideal recording environment, where we're all recording, a lot of us are recording in our spare bedrooms. We don't have as amazing a room as you're sitting in there, Jens. But at the end of the day, I think I get that question. Obviously we take budget in consideration.
Always, yes. Always.
And I guess my question for Jens would be: is there a desert island microphone, and then maybe what's a good alternative that you recommend for somebody looking to record, let's say a resonator banjo, three-finger style?
Yes, we have to see that that a lot of recordings on banjos were always made like, because it's a snare drum, you can always equalize, but you can always get an SM57 and you make it work, right? And you could also like the SM7B you got there would be a nice dynamic microphone option that could do a decent recording. You can maybe equalize a little bit, maybe you have to tame some of the highs a little bit in your post production, equalizing a little bit, but it will do a job. And then when I think just in general, I would say an SM81
Sure.
is because the banjo has so many overtones and so many highs, you don't want to necessarily get a microphone that has very many hyped highs. That means that the frequency curves and the highs are lifted, usually around 3 to 5K, and they go up, quite a lot. That is very good for speech and is good for other things, but the banjo already has so many overtones that you don't necessarily want to add these, to the recording. So the SM81 is an old standard, that has been used a lot in studios, because the sound is actually not huge, but it's very tamed and sits great in the mix. So this is a wonderful microphone to work with, and it also works in a environment that's not 100% treated room and such. There's also a microphone called a CAD by Equitech, and that is very linear. I would have to get it from the closet. But then other options, studio recording options that people have, of course, is the Royer 121.
We love those.
Which they have they're called a ribbon microphone, and so their response is a little bit more tame in the highs. It's a little bit almost rolled off, but it's just gentle, and the highs sound a little bit more acoustic. Great recordings have been made with the Royer. That's a fantastic
We use
microphone.
a Royer when we do our videos.
That's a great microphone.
Curious too, if I might ask, have you experimented with flipping it around and reversing the clarity?
Yes, I have. I also used the Royer as a back microphone to a SM8081, and then reversed the polarity to get a mid-side stereo. But that's too complicated. So, but here we also have what I use, sometimes, and of course that's not in the budget. Basically, I just want to show it. It's Schoeps.
Yep.
So we use, I just did a classical project with string quartet, and they were using with Schoeps. So I sometimes just match what others are using in the same recording session. So I'm a little bit, it's like if I'm playing it, say, on a more gritty recording that's a little bit more, Texas Roadhouse, then I maybe use my 1073 Neve preamp, just to sort of give it a little bit more of that mid-rangey, dirtiness. But in classical recordings, I use the Schoeps as also stereo pair, But I did lots of recordings with the Neumann, the KM180, the 184.
There you go. Yeah, sure.
And I used to own the 84s, which sound a little bit different, but a little warmer, I might say. But this microphone is great. And I had a discussion with the sound engineer out in Los Angeles, and he said, well, somebody said, yeah, the 184s are not as nice as the 84s. And he said, well, we don't worry about that. We're too busy making hit records with these. So,
right.
so there's nothing wrong with this microphone. It's a great microphone, and I recorded actually a lot of albums, my solo albums as a stereo pair, with the KM with the 184s. If I have a single, let's say somebody sends me a project from Nashville, and I just have to sit in the mix and just have a great banjo tone, I would probably go with the 81 because it just sits no matter what. Also, if I want a little wider banjo sound, I have the KSM 32, which is really has a signature, almost like an older Neumann, you would say, because it's got a little bit of the sparkle in the highs, that the 81 doesn't have, and it also, because it's a larger diaphragm microphone, it is a little bit wider in the sound. And then, of course, I record a lot of sessions I have done over all the 20 years with the U87 Neumann, but that's not a budget microphone, and I don't think sometimes you have to be careful if you're not really working in these productions. I mean, this is the most iconic banjo recording microphone, I would say. I think J.D. Crowe recorded almost everything with this. Sonny Osborne did, and so did a lot of others. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the best option, but it has a specific sound that sits in the mix really, really well, and you don't have to fiddle with too much equalizing. I usually use the pad, the 10 dB pad, so I'm not overwhelming the microphone with my banjo. Get a little bit of a cleaner tone. But this is this. But for our Kruger Brothers recordings, I have not used it actually that much. I use the 184s or something else. I also have AEA ribbon microphones. But just back to the basics. I think if you plug this in, and I point it, towards the banjo, I don't. There's people who point it, down here. I never really was. My banjo never really sounded that good down here. But if I have it, pointing like this, about a foot away.
Sure.
With this, you would get a little closer. But with a microphone like the SM81, I would get a little bit further away and sort of point it right below my hand, right, sort of to the banjo, and I think I get the fullest sound.
You
With
point
that.
towards the center of the head, or would you move
Well,
to
if
the outside edge? Or
my
can you
hand,
experiment?
if my hand is here, it would point. Oh, I have to the optics on
I got
the
you.
camera.
So you're coming in at the angle, pointing towards the center.
Yeah, like a little bit like this, you know, not directly like this. Let's say, you know, not like this, but a little bit like this, maybe a foot away, and that sort of gives me a good tone. I use when I use stereo recordings, you know, I would be like this, you know, a little bit more like this.
Okay.
You know, pointing towards the banjo, and but stereo recordings are a little bit more tricky because you got to make sure that the phase is right and all of this. But if I do sessions and I just need to have a banjo that really sits nicely in the mix, I use usually one microphone. That's plenty. I don't need the banjo to be huge. And SM81, if you look at the chart of the SM81, it's pancake flat. Mm-hmm. So there's people who have said, well, it sounds maybe a little boring, but I don't think so. The banjo source is not boring at all. And it sounds very sweet. And it's actually very comparable. I mean, that sounds, it's very comparable to the Schoeps. The Schoeps may be just a hair, I don't know, more transparent, but that's really a little bit. Not enough to mention in a mix. I think the 81 is a very, very great alternative. And also the 141s, Shure 141s, is a good option, you know, just to record a banjo. And then it depends a little bit, you know, how everybody else records, you know, in the session. That's why sometimes I ask, you know, is everybody recording stereo? Is everything wide? Is everything, you know, what kind of microphones do you use? You know, is it more of a gritty thing? And I, you know, I usually get the track, I listen to it, and I decide, yeah, I think my banjo would sit best with that. I have to get up, and I'm going to show you the Equitech that I'm using a lot. And you asked me about Desert Island microphone. I think this is the microphone that almost works for everything, and it also is the microphone that is ideal for home recording because it has a hypercardioid, and it just doesn't pick up much of the room. Hold on just a second. It has some spots on it, but this is the Equitech, you know, and they make a new version of it, and it sounds great, and it's just a universal microphone that works in any situation, really, and it sounds great. I recorded entire albums for friends with this, recording the banjo, the guitar, mandolin, everything, and you just mix it together, and it actually sounds good. You know, it's just fine. So it doesn't need, and this is a budget microphone. I don't know exactly how expensive it is, but it's very reasonable, very, very reasonable. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the investment on the 81. I mean, it's not a super expensive mic.
No, it's not, and they do a great job. You know, I speak to some very, you know, how you say, sophisticated sound engineers. You know. Mm-hmm. And they come and say, well, I love the 81 still, you know, it's just a good mic, and you just put it in front of any source, or like the KSM 32, you can put it in front of any source, and it will pretty much, you know, pick up a good signal. You know, it will do something that's workable. It's just this sound is a little more sparkly and a little wider, a little less mid-range, and maybe you have to work a little harder to get the banjo to sit in the mix a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. Just maybe cut a little high, you know, work a little bit on the EQ just to get it right in the mix. But with the 81, you don't ever have to worry. You just put it on there and you just put it in the mix, and there it is, you know.
So are you ever in a situation where you feel like in a live, I guess my question too would be live use, you know, where you may not you might be in a big stage, or we've got in-ear monitoring, or we have a loud audience, and we need, you know, situations where a customer might want a pickup. Or do you have a preference on a pickup that you go to?
Yes, actually I do, and because I've been using a pickup and a microphone combination for our shows for, I think, about 15 years, 16 years. On all the shows, I'm using a pickup and and a microphone, unless I am asked to play on shows, where I play bluegrass. I was just on a bluegrass project with a bunch of people, and it was great. But just played into a microphone, and just played into a stage microphone, whatever they had. I just played into it, right, and let the mixer do whatever he does. But when we're when we're on the road with our band, well, I'm using a Fishman pickup, a Fishman Rare Earth. That's what I've been using. I have a Fishman amp, and the Fishman acoustic, the loud box, the biggest one they got, and so. They are affordable, they sound great, and they're exchangeable, right? I have multiple units, in Europe and in America, so I can just sort of, send them around, or when I go to Europe, I have one there. So that makes it easy, and they're reliable. And if it breaks, I can just buy a new one, and it's just great stuff, really. Actually, I never broke one. They're so good, and so... I use a little bit of delay on that, and our sound engineer, takes it. I use a little bit of a notch filter, no equalizing other than that. And for the low frequencies of the pickup, there's a little bit of a build up maybe sometimes, and I just have to build that. And then our sound engineer uses, I think, a MyLab DC 196 or something, and that's what he likes. He likes, because he knows how to equalize that. And that would be a similar mic from the sound, maybe as the KSM 32. And I think the KSM 32 is a great live microphone for banjo.
I agree. Yeah,
it sounds fantastic. Even when you go very close to the banjo, you can see that a lot. There's actually live recordings with Ron Block, with Alison Krauss Union Station, where he uses this mic very close. I think Jerry Douglas used it for many, many years on his Dobro Live, and it's a spectacular live microphone for banjo because it's warm. It's got a sparkle, but it's warm.
And it doesn't have that ice pick kind of thing.
No, it doesn't. No. It sounds beautiful. It's very, very usable microphone, and I'm always astounded, how Shure is a great company. Just do such workhorses.
Oh, and they're drop tested too. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I'm not going to drop
them. Yeah, that microphone in particular, because a lot of people will use that as an overhead drum microphone with the chaos of cymbals and everything, and just capturing the kit. That's why I found in a bluegrass ensemble it works so well.
Yes, the KSM. I think they use it also, and they used it in the Grand Ole Opry for years, as the main mic, and I think I saw Rhonda Vincent, for years play with that, on stage, singing everybody's singing into it. It's just a very, very well built a mic that is very, very, very usable. And it's high end, it just has more, let's say, more of a pristine sound than, let's say, a SM58 that would just work great, but but the sound that's coming out of that microphone is just a little bit more rich, Yes, and I also feel like you could also experiment with the positioning of the microphone. Let's say you have a banjo, you have the position, and that would be like the diaphragm is flat onto the head. Right, you have a really different sound than if you tilt the microphone a little bit and don't have the whole bass energy you get into or the high frequencies just go straight into the microphone. You can swirl it around a little bit like that or like that, and sort of change it or even get it a little bit like that. You can try different positions where you feel like the banjo sounds like you would like to hear it. So the instrument, and you can also back up a little bit, and see. But I wouldn't, the positioning of the mic is very, very crucial. You can, I have done recordings with the microphone. I thought it sounded good. Then next time I tried it, it didn't sound that well. But then I realized, I had it way too close, or, and also there are peaks in the banjo. If you go to the meter, on your DAW, you see that. You have micro peaks that go sometimes above zero. So it's better to actually have that banjo, not too hot, in the recording. Just keep it at -18 or something. Just keep it down so you don't have these peaks going over zero that you don't see, but they actually overwhelm your system, and you have slight distortions that you can't really.
Zero's bad in these digital.
Yeah, because and even if you have like you have these. What banjos absolutely don't like is soft clip functions in apogees, and all that. These soft clip functions completely destroy the banjo tone, in my opinion. You'd rather, go softer in recording and don't have that soft clip starts at -18 dB, I think, and it starts to roll off and sort of does all kinds of, folding in of the frequencies. So it sounds warm, and it should emulate, something maybe more analog, I believe. And there's applications where that absolutely makes sense, and it's really fine. But banjos, also compressions on banjos, is something that to be very careful of. If I use compression on the banjo, I make sure that the transients are not touched. So I'm putting up the compression, maybe 50, 60, 80 milliseconds, and then have a release, at around 100, 150. And then don't pump it too much, just give it a slight bit, and otherwise I'm starting to destroy. If you, let's say, have a very fast attack on the banjo, you're starting to just sort of make that whole banjo pump, and it starts to sound awkward in the mix, because it sounds, everything starts melding together as like a sustained thing that's like a soup. And you just got to be careful not overdoing processing with the banjo.
Yeah, we're getting real geeky, but you're absolutely correct.
I'm sorry.
No. I've run into that where you overcompress, and then you obviously have to have that makeup gain, and now you're bringing up all the chaos.
I'm just mentioning all of that because I know that we have lots of listeners today that are also having home recordings, and want to record their banjos, and I think just sometimes having less is a lot more helpful than trying to then put tape emulations and and compressors and tube and I don't know, adding all that stuff, because they all, let's say, everything that in audio world, when you say it's warm, it usually distorts the highs. It usually sort of the highs are more tamed by adding a distortion to it, and that is considered warm, but it doesn't help the banjo tone. The banjo becomes a little grainy. That's the word, and to have a clean banjo recording, just turn off, the soft, the soft clip function. Don't over compress. Don't go too high when you record, and you will have fine results. Use a standard microphone, from Shure, or something that's fairly linear and not extremely hyped. Like the Rode NT1 you got there is a great microphone, Jamie. A lot of people use that as home recording microphone. I don't have one here. I have tried it, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant microphone. Yeah,
that's good. Purchased from Sweetwater.
Yes. There you go.
Exactly. I think banjos are just so joyful. I think Banjo Day is also a good idea.
It's hard not to hold one and smile. I know that.
It feels good to hold a banjo and sit on your porch or wherever, and play the banjo. It just feels great. You don't have a big bulky neck. You don't have a huge instrument. It just feels wonderful.
It's inherently portable as well. Without the need for amplification.
And almost indestructible.
Almost. Your airlines that you frequent, Jens, I hear maybe proving that method wrong, right? They're
yes, I have.
Causing all kinds of tragedy right now with.
Well, the thing is, in all the 41 years of traveling now, 46 years of traveling on the road, I only had 3 incidents. So that's not bad.
It's not bad. But
more things. Let's say more things happen to me than to my banjo.
Yeah, but when they do it, they do a really good job of it, right? I want to know, I'm going to ask you both the same question. Based on everything we just heard, what is your desert island microphone, and what banjo are you recording with? If you could only pick one mic and one banjo to go forward for the rest of your days, where are you going?
Wow.
You go
Who goes
ahead,
first?
You go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead, David.
Oh no, I just put you on the spot, man. You can't
All
copy
right.
each
Well,
other.
Jens mentioned the AEA. I have an AEA, one of the passive mics. I love it because I can kind of vary that tone based on the preamp I'm using it with, because the ribbons yes. So you've got an active one
Jens has
there.
one.
Mine's a little older. It doesn't use any power or preamp. I have to vary that with the preamp I'm using, but I love that. That's a very natural mic for me. And then I love my Eagle too. Not to be a fanboy, but that banjo just is easy to record because it just is. It has that wonderful mid range to it, and with the ribbon mics, I can EQ a little bit of that shelf, that high shelf back in, and give it all the presence it needs.
But for me, I'm recording on this banjo because I'm playing this banjo live all the time. This is a Jens Kruger model with a wrong neck on it. But I've been playing this banjo since 2006, and I really like this banjo. With banjos, once they're set up, you have to get to know the banjo, and once you know the banjo, you can trust that what you do is going to be translated in what you're expecting to it sound. So to know the instrument is more important than just having the best instrument or constantly searching for a better instrument. You just got to buy a good one and then set it up and then trust it and get to know it. So that's my banjo. So I'm recording everything with this instrument that I'm doing. And for a desert mic, actually, to be honest, I would probably use the Ships. Because it's, because I know they're quite costly, but I have to say that it's the cleanest.
Wide cardioid or just straight cardioid?
It's just the MK4 capsule, that's the cardioid capsule. And that mic, does everything. It sounds sweet. It sounds it's flat response. It's, I could record, everything with this microphone on an entire recording. I mean, every instrument, and you make it work. And so for me, with all the years and all the things I've done, they all have their taste and and this also has a certain character, but it has the least of them all. It is the most, that's why it's been used so much in classical recordings, all over the world. It's a standard for all classical recordings. And then you can always, today, you can, in your DAW, you can always insert, Rupert Neve, or, you can insert all kinds of, tube or, warmers or, whatever you want to do. But you have this, everything that the banjo is recorded.
Right.
And so that would be my desert mic. And that was a long answer.
So finger picks, Pro Pick's a great option for that. I know one of you has to have opinions on finger picks, but hit me.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I started that journey. I think like a lot of players, you experiment with one thing. I mean, I have a crate of picks at home. I actually give them away to players that I jam with, to see if, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried this? And I really like the Pro H, I guess the Heritage. Is that what we're calling that, Jamie?
The Heritage,
yeah. So that would be like what I like on the finger pick. I mean, it feels like a vintage. I've had some vintage Yates and other, recreations of the old picks and
nationals and stuff.
No, I never experienced one of the original, so I don't know exactly, how close they were to those. But the Pro Pick H, I think it's got just the right touch. I feel some feedback from the back of the blade to my finger that I'm planted when I have that pick.
That's good. That's a good point. Yeah.
And then my thumb pick, it's hard for me to get away from these little multicolor because I've got plumber's hands, and I don't know what it is about that amalgamated plastic, but it's a little more pliable than just a solid. I know that's weird, but it's a Golden Gate pick, but they just fit better. They feel more comfortable, and I like the tone.
They sound great.
Yeah.
They absolutely sound great. Yes. So I'm the same. I got Pro picks. You know, the Heritage. You know, that's what I've been playing. Even though, you know, I used to play, you know, all these old Nationals from the 50s, 60s, 70s. They're all a little bit different, but I have, you know, dozens and dozens of them. You know, I have you know, actually, you know, a lot of them. You know, and I could easily, you know, just play them. But the thing is, you know, sometimes, you know, picks just, you lose them, or you break them, or you step on them, or, you know, something, and you want to replace them. You know, you just want to have something that is sounding fantastic. And now, what makes a pick sound good? That sounds like an empirical question, but I would say the string is made out of carbon, high carbon steel, and so it's very hard. So if you also hit it with a very hard pick, you have a tendency of producing all kinds of, you know, very clicking, high frequency noises, you know, that in the band sort of could disappear, but they disturb me when I'm playing alone. So stainless steel finger picks and, you know, very hard picks sometimes have a tendency of being a little too clicky up there. That doesn't ever go away. Now, if I have a softer material pick, it's a nickel silver that's softer, the Pro pick is pretty much exactly like a 50s National, which are the most sought after picks, because they when they're new, you cannot, you see, that's the problem when you're starting off with picks. You're buying a new pair of picks and they're not played in, so it would take you weeks, you know, in order to get them to so they play in the way you play. You know, they need to play in the way you play, the way you hit the string. That's where they have to wear off and, you know, start rounding up. And you can prepare it to a certain degree, but you still have to play them in. And the way you play, the way you wear them on your fingers. And once the Pro pick is worn in, it sounds rich and warm and detailed, and everything's there. So that's just a great pick. So I can rely on it. I think this is the third pair now I'm playing, and I have and the next pair is already in the pipes. You know, I'm using them. They maybe last a year or two. Then they start to flatten off on top because I play so much with them. Because they're soft, they wear off. But the great thing is I just get a new pair, and I just put them on my fingers, and I just have that great sound again. So I don't have to worry about them. So I love these picks. There were other pick manufacturers, you know, that had similar material, like Kaiser did, but they don't make them anymore. And there's other manufacturers that used to, but these are so reliable, and I just have them, so I just put them on my fingers and go, don't worry about it. So they're fine. So
we should mention that they wear because of the Jens rate of playing, not
yes,
because
I know.
It's a different rate to most people.
And for a thumb pick, you know, I used to play plastic all the time, but they would always break here on the side. So I started using a blue chip, you know, thumb pick that doesn't break, and I could easily, you know, use the Pro pick also, but I just gotten used to this one, so I'm playing this one. But the Pro pick, you know, thumb pick is the same thing. It's a plastic and a metal band, and you can it doesn't break. So, you know, they would always break here. That's why, you know, we see these banjo players in the 70s or 80s, you know, they have all these picks here.
They have
you
them
know,
all hooked.
Because you know because once the thumb get warm, they don't hold anymore. You know, you're on a stage where it's hot, so you have to get a cool one. and you know, then they break, and then you have to get another one, right? So you're constantly with the thumb pick. You can use finger picks, you know, for years, but thumb picks you constantly work on. So if you buy a Pro pick, you know, thumb pick that has, you know, a plastic and a metal band, they will never break. So they're as reliable as the finger picks. So that really doesn't matter, and that helps me a great deal. You know, on stage, I don't have to worry about my equipment. You know, you know, I don't have to worry about these things. Right. And I always had to used to worry about picks. So I think this is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
the samurai must have a reliable sword there, yes.
Well, it is, you know, you don't want to be on stage and the thumb picks breaks off. It happened to me before, you know, it's just starting getting loose, and then you have to, you know, grab and get another one, and it feels slightly different, you know. And also, I think string choices are extremely important. For the banjo, you got to have the strings that you feel comfortable with. That's why there's so many different sets out there. And if somebody is a beginner and he doesn't know what to play, for instance, I would just tell him, get the Deering lights. The GHS made strings, which is some of the best materials ever made for strings, really. They're from Mapes wire, but anyway, they go this route. But the gauges are important. So 10, 11, 13 is a fantastic gauge that works pretty much for everybody, for clawhammer, for bluegrass, for everything. You could also get a 12.5 maybe, or as a third. But that's just a regular set. If you look at banjo sets from the 50s and 60s, people would maybe play slightly thinner strings, like 9.5s or 9s, on a banjo. But if somebody really doesn't know and doesn't have a preference, just go with the 10, 11, 13, just a Deering light set, and you're all set. You have a set that works on everything, for every style, for anything you want to do. Hard driving, Terry Bauckham, in the last years, that's all he played, and it's just, countless banjo players in this world would use that kind of, string. I personally play a little thicker strings. I have 11s, 12, 13, 22, 11. And it's only because I have these passages where I play really loud notes. And then I don't want the banjo to not react anymore. I want that energy from the string. But it makes it a little bit more hard for note separation. The thicker the string is, the more hard it gets for note separation. But a 10 gauge is just wonderful. It does everything. And to say winding, there's steel wound or nickel wound. And I personally like nickel wound because the steel wound sound fantastic new, but they die very quickly. And once they're dead, they sound very dull. But when they're new, they sound brighter. But a nickel doesn't sound as bright when you put it on, but it lasts longer for me. So that's why I like a nickel. That's all practical. Also, that's all practical things, so I don't have to worry about the equipment when I go work.
There you go. Dave, you got a preferred string gauge?
I've been just a GHS 140, guy. I have played around with the 9.5 gauge a little bit that D'Addario is offering. We see a lot of strings around Sweetwater. I get to try a lot of samples.
Yes.
So hint, next time you guys are out, I'll try some Deering. I would love to.
I got you. I'll send you some.
But I kind of, and again, I'm still exploring. So I maybe haven't even settled on what I'm going to use forever. But for the time being, I want to say it's a PF 140, the GHS or what.
Do you know the thicknesses of it?
I know it's a 10. I know it's a 10 on my, and I want to say it might be a 22 as well.
The
on
gauges
that,
are different. I remember when we switched to GHS, it was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. And we're very open about the fact that they make our strings. Their logo's on all the packaging and all that kind of stuff. And all the comments and all the reviews would say, "Oh man, I've been playing GHS for years. These are much better than GHS strings." And I'm like, they are GHS strings. They're just a different gauge set.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And they're a bit more, Jens had a big play in that as well, in terms of determining the gauges for each of those strings. It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
It really does. And also bridges, banjo bridges and banjo
Don't get me
heads.
started on bridges. I have a box full of bridges too that I went down the rabbit hole with.
Well, and Jens, you probably do this as well. One player that we neglected to mention when we were talking about three-finger modern players is Kristen Scott Benson.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
When we sent her banjo, she spent like 2 weeks just going back and forth with different bridges, just to see which one kind of fitted with that particular banjo.
Oh yeah,
and she does the same thing with everything. And Jens, I'm sure you do the same thing too.
But choosing bridges, I can say something about that maybe. If you buy, let's say, just a regular, if somebody puts on a new bridge on his banjo, he will miss the old bridge. Okay, it's like you go into a fast food chain and all of a sudden you get a different menu than you wanted to. You know, you're just getting used to. People are just, and sometimes it's really getting used to the bridge. I've seen many professional musicians, you know, who just play what came on, and never even worried about it, and they just gotten used to it. And sometimes it's a getting used to that bridge and just playing it for a while, and don't just change it instantly. You know, I've been through that where I change bridges, like, oh, I listen to this, no, I don't like it, next one I don't like it, the next one I don't like it. And if I could have taken any of these bridges pretty much and just left them on the banjo for 2 weeks and play it, and it would settle in my mind of how it sounds, and I would get the nuances out of the banjo. And you can put yourself also in a state of mind where you start to look for something that doesn't exist, and also, you know, always be unhappy with what you got. And I think there's a few bridge makers, you know, also, you know, as we have Deering, of course, you know, there's Deering bridges. No matter which one you buy, they're all good bridges. So you can take, you know, just a standard 5/8 or 11/16 bridge, you know, and we developed that Smiley bridge. The Smiley bridge, the idea of the Smiley bridge is basically a very simple one. If you have pressure from the strings, the bridge the head does that, right?
Yeah, you have a deviation.
Yeah, the head sort of bends, and so then all that pressure is on the outside of the bridge, and the inside sort of is not
Sags,
pushing up.
right?
And the problem there is that the banjo bridge after a while just starts sagging, and then you see all these older banjos with these, you know, Grover bridges and stuff, and they all sort of have sagging third strings down. And also the transferring of the sound, the bridge can't move that easy if the middle foot is not pushing up as well as the others, and so the bridge is restricted, and the whole sound spectrum is not quite as even, you know, put it this way. And so when the Smiley bridge is sort of it's sort of in the middle ground, you know. It works between a head tension with a light gauge string between G and A and B flat, and it's fine. Once you would go up to C, you know, you might get so tight that you would see the outside coming up a little bit, you know. but and if you get really, really super low, you would never see the difference, you know. But that banjo, so it's sort of in the middle ground of things, and it really helps the banjo bridge to maintain its shape and transfer the sound well. And then you have to see the little groove where the string is going through, you know, on the top of, you know, on the ebony. That also has to work itself in and has to stay there for a while. Sometimes you put on a new bridge and the strings don't react that well. Just give it
They can pinch. You know.
Just let it sit for a while. Just let it do its thing and play it, and all of a sudden the whole thing just sort of comes together, and it starts to work. You know, because there again the wood has to be high quality, has to be built well, and then the tolerances between the bridges is not as big as you would think. You know, that's a fact. You know, so a bridge is around, you know, 1.8 grams to 2.3, somewhere in there. And so if you're around 2.1, 2.2 grams or whatever, you know, that bridge will be fine. You know, it will do its thing. But again, it needs to be made out of wood that is vibrant, not just dead. You know, not just a hard wood, not just, you know, something that is just not resonant at all. You know, it needs to be able to sort of bring back things and not just die on you. And that's why there's quality bridges out there, you know, that you can buy, and you can try maybe 2 or 3, but then you just also have to let the banjo be, and set the banjo up, you know, with the head tension not too low because it's getting too soggy. Or, you know, it's just get fine-tuned. But I think the bridges is fine. And if you got nice strings and nice picks, you don't have to worry just just play. You know, just play. I mean, I think music in general, you know, if you want to be a professional musician, you want to really learn the instrument, with everything, very fast, learn all the techniques and everything. But if you are on the journey of discovering, music and just being in that realm of music, and that has a lot to do with yourself, with you. And I think the only guide you really need is your taste and your heart. Mm-hmm. You need to follow what you love, not what you think you should do too much. Maybe a little bit. Listen to advice, listen to things that make sense to you. But the things that you need to do, they always resonate with you also. There's something that you feel like, oh, that's a good idea. I love doing that, right? So if you love doing it, then you play more. And yes. Music, there's a nice saying. It says, the more you give to the music, the more heart you give to the music, the more the music can give you back. So it's almost like a resonance, into something. Music, if you are too focused, I got to go through this and I have to do this and that, I have to do this. There's no joy, and there's no love. There's desperation, and in the end, you start to be in a desperate world, and you maybe be even able to play a lot of things, but you're never happy about them. So there's a happiness that comes with following what you love, and you don't have to. You find the people that do what you love. You learn from them, and you always follow that bliss. You don't. And I think that's so important, because music is such a huge field, and it's so much you could learn. So much you there's so many opportunities, but I don't have to do everything. All I need to do is the things that I like, and the others do the things they like, and I admire them for that. So I think that's very important to see your own role as you don't have to cover everything. You also only have to cover your own love for music.
Love it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.